Thanks so much to David Carter, Megabyte Musings, and Kaj for sponsoring the ClubFRadio.wave podcast. It's a fucking mouthful, and this is like the fourth time I've recorded this intro.
Chase, your feet are hairy, but they're not as hairy as mine.
I'm a hobbit. They're supposed to be hairy.
I said they're not as hairy as mine, so what am I?
A gay hobbit. I don't know.
I was going to say troll, but everyone calls me troll at work, so. But my hair doesn't, like those little bitty mini trolls used to have like the hairdo that spike up in the air. I used to do that with my hair. Now that I'm almost 30 and I'm losing my hair, I can't do it anymore. Sad day. I need some of the hair from my feet to go to my head.
That would not work out.
Why?
Okay, let's just fucking jump right into it. If you want to say something more clever than me, you're welcome to do it.
I'm still eating my beans and cornbread. You just give me a minute, all right?
Beans and cornbread?
Yes.
That is not in your diet.
What? What do you know about my diet?
I know that's a lot of carbs.
So? I ain't counting calories right now.
You counting carbs? I didn't say calories. I said carbs. Nothing. That's what I thought.
All right. Welcome back to the ClubFRadio.wave podcast. Today we're going to be joined by Super 64, of course, but also by our good friend Nick, a.k.a. Halquint.
What's up?
You've probably heard Nick's voice before. I'm pretty sure. Do you guys remember, Nick, do you remember what series you debuted on for us?
Minecraft?
Yep. It was Minecraft. You weren't even on screen. Not yet. We were just like, Nick, you okay? And you were like, skeletons. Zombies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were like, Nick's having a hard time, you guys.
Yeah.
But of course, Nick has been a major cast member in a more recent popular series, Divinity: Original Sin Dungeons Dipshits, where he plays Greg the Manfish, who is maybe more than a little loosely based on a Mighty Boosh skit.
Oh, Greg!
And then, of course,
Nick made that up himself.
Yeah, I made that up.
It's back in high school.
Chase, why don't you go ahead and talk about what we're going to talk about today and why we decided to talk about it?
All right, so World of Warcraft Classic has released, last Tuesday? Something like that?
Yeah.
I think a week ago. And as bad as I want to play, just to go back to a time when WoW was still good, I can't justify giving Blizzard anymore. So I thought we'd just have a podcast where we just talked about our old memories of any MMOs that were just, a fun time. Just any memories that were funny. Just anything really related.
Yeah, and I think it's a great idea. We've had kind of a unique experience with MMOs, and it gives me an opportunity to get a story out of Nick, because Nick has one of my favorite MMO related stories. I think he may disagree, but I want to get it out of him, so we're gonna work our way up to it. We're gonna kind of go up in chronological order of our first MMO. But I do have a question for Nick prior, because I don't know the answer to this. Nick, what was the first MMORPG you played?
WoW.
Okay.
World of Warcraft.
So we're gonna start a little earlier than that. And I don't know if it's actually earlier. It's just we kind of took a really weird roundabout way to get to MMORPG. Because neither me nor Chase were willing to pay a monthly subscription fee for any game. This was a very different time. Now like they're pushing games as a service hardcore. They're trying to make that the norm. But meanwhile, we perceived it as like a gaming bill. And this was before people paid for like Xbox Live and stuff like that. So we just couldn't bring ourselves to do it. And speaking of what Mayo's saying in the chat here, our first MMORPG was free to play. Chase, do you know which one I'm going to say?
Wow. No, hold on, because there's a lot of options.
Why don't you go ahead, because you may say something that I'm not going to say, because we played a lot of rinky-dink things first.
Yeah, it's one of... Oh, man, no, it's like one of... Okay. It's got to be one of these. In order of most likely, I'm going to say Dragon Soldier, Marco Land, Adventure Quest, or Tibia. It's got to be one of those.
Okay, so there were a number of games that we played in the computer lab at school. And for those of you that are teenagers right now, your school may have, devices for you. I'm sure you're playing games on them and shit. But when we were in school, the only time we ever got to get on a computer was when we went to the computer lab. And the moment you sat down at a computer in a computer lab, your mission was to find a way to play games. So we were very frequently playing these text-based MMORPGs, things like Marco Land and Adventure Quest and Dragon Soldier and stuff like that. But there are two that I really do want to talk about that we leaned up from after that, and that's Tibia and another one that I think you've forgotten, but I want to go ahead and talk about Tibia a little bit. I never played RuneScape. And to me, Tibia seemed like poor man's RuneScape, but I loved it. What Tibia was it was kind of a top-down isometric, really low graphics MMORPG, and the level of freedom on it was really cool because, like, if there were items on the ground, you could click and drag them, and it kind of represented you picking them up and throwing them and shit like that. And you could chat while you played, and you know the combat was kind of turn-based and kind of action-oriented. But there was, a lot of games like this were kind of the Wild West. They didn't know what mechanics were going to stick and which ones weren't. So there were some mechanics that made for a lot of fun in that game, and that was the way it handled PvP and the way it handled tutorials. Chase, what was the tutorial island called?
Rookguard.
Rookguard, okay. And so it was an island that you had to complete a series of quests to leave, and once you left you could never come back. And so there would typically be people hanging out right at spawn, and their goal was to immediately take advantage of how little you knew about the game and scam you in some way. And I successfully did that to one of our friends. Do you remember this?
I remember two different ones. Kyle, and I thought you scammed Jake.
Did I scam Jacob? I definitely got Kyle. So essentially, one of my biggest running gags with our friend Kyle is that you could fill jars with just about any liquid, and some of the enemies, their blood was like poison, so you could just jar up poison. So I just waited at spawn the day that he said he was gonna play, and he was like, "Oh, hey, Jesse," and I was like, "Hey, Kyle." I was like, "Kyle, I'm gonna go ahead and get you started. Here, drink this. It's gonna level you up a couple levels." And so he drank poison and just started dying. And here I am in fucking early high school, just chasing him around going, "You're fucking stupid. You listened to me and now you're dying." It didn't kill him, unfortunately. He talked to a healer, and that was, I like whenever RPGs combine text-based adventure mechanics with the game, because you could say certain phrases to the NPCs and they would help you. Like I'm pretty sure you just talked to a priest NPC and they were like, "How could I help you to this?" And he was like, "Heal!" And they just healed him. So it didn't work out. But Chase, tell us a little bit more about that game. What's probably the next thing that comes to your mind when you think of Tibia?
Well, there's two different memories for me, for sure. My biggest one is I was playing one day and I was in the middle of town, and in Tibia, I can't remember if it was by server, like World of Warcraft, where it was PvP, or if it was just always open PvP.
Yeah.
I think it was always open because your name would change.
Yeah.
Because it was almost like a Sword Art Online thing where your name would turn red and anyone could attack you.
Oh, I know where this is going. I remember this.
Yeah,
now.
If you had killed a player, you were marked for everyone to see. And if anybody wanted to, take out justice on you, they could. But I was playing one day, and I'm in the middle of town, and and I was sitting there, and this dude comes into town running, as much as you could run in fucking Tibia, a 1997 game. But dude's running into town, and he's just screaming, in all caps, yelling out, "So-and-so's coming! Oh, he's coming! Get the fuck out of town! He's coming! He's coming!" And I was just like, all right, whatever. I'm gonna go eat. So I logged out of the game, and I went downstairs and got me some food. Sorry. And when I got done eating, I come back upstairs. I log back in. Whole town's on fire, and literally everyone's dead. And I was just like, okay, so apparently he was coming. I didn't know who this guy was, but he was infamous on the server for murdering people and bringing down whole town shit. So,
and one thing that made that Wild West shit possible is that there was no level cap in that game. You could just keep grinding until you were just an insane level and nobody could fuck with you. What were they gonna do? Devote weeks of their time to possibly catching up to you who already has no life. So there were people who were the real life version of that fat lard from the South Park episode, who. But the thing is, they were always cool. I met one once. He was level 140, and I was like, "Dude," and he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Your level," and he was like, "Oh yeah." I was like, "Oh yeah, what? Jesus fucking Christ, dude." But that brings me to, honestly, my favorite story to tell about Tibia is that it had a huge language barrier issue. And I have seen a webcomic about this, and in the video version of the podcast, I'm going to put this webcomic in there and let you guys get a look at it while I'm talking about it. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, I'm sure you know where to go. But it's a guy playing a game. It doesn't say that it's Tibia, but it's clearly Tibia. And he's just like, this game's really good. It's, it's small. There's not a lot of players, and it's kind of goofy graphics, but it's really fun. And then it just has people running up to him being like, BR, you speak Portuguese? And he's just like, no, I'm sorry. This is an American server. I don't speak Portuguese. He's like, give money, please. And he's just like, no. He's like, I kill you now. And so, like, the server, essentially, in the comic, the server gets overrun by people who don't speak English, and it just, like, goes to shit. And that's what always happened on our servers, too, was that it was always filled with Brazilian players, and we never could figure out what the source of that phenomenon was. But, like, if you couldn't speak Portuguese, they would kill you immediately if you didn't say something in Portuguese back.
Yeah, if you tried to bullshit them, like they'd come up and be like, BR question mark, and you could say back BR, and just to be like trying, like, yeah, I'm Portuguese, whatever, and then they would say something, like a full sentence after that in their language, and then you were screwed because like all you could be was like BR again, and that's when they'd kill you.
Yeah, but it was a fascinating little game. It was a really neat little first experience with that kind of stuff, and it was very, very high risk reward because I haven't played a lot of MMOs since that when you die, your corpse becomes lootable. Like, I was actually very surprised that other MMOs weren't like that, but your corpse became lootable just like any other thing. So if you got PK'd in the world, like, your life was gone because if you didn't have it in your vault, like if it was like your equipped hard-earned shit, it was gone. Or even if you just died out in the world and didn't get back to your body in time. Yeah, Mort says basically Rust. Yeah, that if it were an open world enormous MMO. So like I loved it like that. And eventually it got to the point to where it wasn't fun to play like that, but I loved the high risk, high reward element of it. Chase, the game that you might not have thought of, but you mentioned when we were planning for this, is Grail Online. So Grail Online, I don't know if it was that big. My cousin actually introduced it to me, and she didn't really play a lot of games at the time, so that was really interesting. But it was essentially like knockoff Zelda Link to the Past, but an MMO. And it was very anime themed. Like they tried to make the graphics kind of chibi and cutesy. So it was like Gaia, but I'm not misspeaking. Yeah, Gaia wasn't exactly a game. Whereas Grail, it was, again, just this Wild West shit. Like, it was just wacky in there. And one day, I got into a game, and I was exploring the world. I was trying to find cool stuff to do, and this dude was following me. And eventually, I just stopped, and I go, dude, you following me? He was like, yeah. I was like, you trying to kill me? He was like, yeah. And I was like, stop. And he was like, no way, man. And so, like, I just kept running. And the way it worked in that game was it was like Zelda-style screens. So you screen transition. So at some point, I just literally jumped into the ocean and started swimming. And he was swimming after me. And I managed to get far enough ahead that I looped around. And he had no way of knowing that I had looped around because he could only see one square ahead of you at any time. And so some say he's still swimming out into that ocean to this day.
He's still trying to find you.
Nick, did you ever play Guild Wars?
I played a little bit of Guild Wars 2.
Okay. Chase, I think Guild Wars was our next MMO, right? The first one?
I would consider it our first major. Like, yeah, we played Tibia, we played RuneScape and Grail shit. Like full-blown MMO RPG, I think Guild.
And I remember a lot of people being like, well, Guild Wars isn't an MMO. Guild Wars isn't an MMO. And I understand why they said that, because it didn't meet their criteria. But in a way, Guild Wars kind of started what I consider to be a different genre of multiplayer RPGs. Like, I don't consider Guild Wars an MMO. I just kind of consider it a MORP. Like, I just think it's a single M, because that's what a lot of games today are. They're almost imitating Guild Wars 1 in that you can be in hub worlds and see a lot of people, but when you go into the overworld, you're instanced with a small party. Guild Wars was a blast, and again, we were still not interested in playing a subscription, and as a matter of fact, that colored what Chase decided to name his main character.
Yeah, I played a warrior. His name was just not paying monthly. And
People loved it.
Yeah, people loved it. I would get whispers all the time. Like, oh, dude, that's hilarious. Fuck World of Warcraft. And I was just like, yeah, fuck them. Even though I'm going to wind up playing that game a lot more than this one in the future that I don't know yet. But, yeah, I loved that name. And we had several jokes, like, you know, like in-universe lore jokes about my name, about how I would go to, like, bars and I was never paying before I paid the tab. And just goofy shit like that.
In a weird way, Guild Wars is where the whole notion of, if you've kept up with some of the, like, video ending things that I've done lately, Guild Wars is kind of like where that started, because I always had a mental storyline running as we played, and we would sometimes make jokes about the mental storyline, but we were never hardcore role-playing the whole time. Like, we would just be like, well, what does this mean for the story, or what does this mean for the story? And that kind of stuck with me as we move forward. But, Guild Wars was another one of those games where, like, the rules weren't fully established. Like, for example, there wasn't world PvP, but there was like competitive tournament style PvP, and there were a lot of, like, interesting builds that, like, broke the mechanics. I know Matt sure loves talking about this because
yeah.
Matt had a 55 monk, and the whole point of a 55 monk is to intentionally not give yourself a lot of health so that you only have to use really basic healing spells and just spam the shit out of them and constantly keep yourself at 55 HP.
Yeah, like it, and I think it did a lot of damage too. Like it was the definition of glass cannon, because like he couldn't be hit like even once or he was dead. Like 55 damage was not hard to achieve.
Yeah. So, and then the other kind of fascinating thing about that game to me is that it wasn't completely open world in the style of a World of Warcraft. It was more or less, a lot of times I'll call it like connected racetracks, because you had your hub worlds and then you had your linear paths that were like, it was like wilderness or overworld, but it was just like a Halo level almost. Like it was, if you were to look at it from a developer's perspective, it'd probably just be a canyon, like going in a certain direction, and it would lead to another hub world, or it would lead to another zone just like it. And there were a lot of situations like that where it didn't exactly storyline gate you. It just put a lot of really hard shit in the way, and then it would teleport you to where you needed to be. You weren't supposed to actually go that way, but people would charge to run you through those areas. And the biggest one was the Drox run, and it was like people would charge you and run you through to like the last game area where all of the really high-end items were, and nothing was stopping you from getting. So I'm fascinated by that kind of thing, by like the emergent gameplay that arises from the game not really being finished.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to be a Drox runner. I would run people from I can't remember it's one of the very small, it's almost like a camp rather than a city, but you had to meet me there, and then they would stand at the edge of that camp while I would put on everything I could to like dodge moves and run faster, because like there was no stopping and fighting. Like you couldn't fight your way there as a solo person, even at max level. Just wasn't happening. Too many enemies. So like I would put on everything I could to dodge damage and run faster, and then I would just haul ass, and whenever I zoned, it would bring them with me. So like I would run from that area to Drox, just back and back and make it.
There were several expansions to that game. I really enjoyed them. We kept our storyline running, and that's kind of where our silly continuous canon started, of like us having characters that moved from story to story. I'll include some screenshots of those guys if I can find them. I remember this was one of the times I actually dealt with some really unsolicited outrage, because I found some fan art that I loved of an African-American version of Goku, and the artist's name was just Da Black Goku. And so I made a character that looked like him, and I named him Da Black Goku. And I had a guy PM me, calling me a racist son of a bitch, and then he blocked me. And I was like, all right, cool, I hope that made you happy. Like, I hope you feel justified in that, because I always loved that art, man. I wish there was more of it. Now, the first MMO that we actually paid for, because we finally just gave up and did it, wasn't World of Warcraft. But
Oh,
nope.
yeah.
It was one of my favorite MMO experiences of all time. One that sadly it kind of died out, and we haven't seen games really replicate that as well since then. And that's City of Heroes. I bought City of Heroes to play on my computer before I moved and before I met Chase. My computer wasn't good enough. And so I just had it. I just physically owned this box copy of this game that I couldn't play. On top of the fact that you had to pay a monthly subscription for it. So like I had never done that because I couldn't get the game to install and run well. And one day I just lent it to Chase. I was like, if you can get this installed, let's pay for it and play it on your computer. And he got it installed while I was away. And I remember he either called me or texted me and was like, this character creator's shit. And I was like, City of Heroes is like the character creator is known for being one of the greatest character creators there are right now. It was a superhero MMO. I was like, surely you're just doing it wrong. And I came over and he had created the most gorgeous video game character I've ever seen because he had accidentally left on the button that keeps the color theming together. He couldn't change the colors the way he wanted to. So once we turned that off, he made some fine-tune some adjustments. I'm definitely going to put a picture of him up. So this is
Face Cowboy Ninja.
not exactly the most original thing in the world, but it was great. It was like a white cowboy with like alien elements on him and stuff like that. I made a character based on a comic I'd drawn as a kid named Cyber X. And Cyber X is not a robot. He's a dude in like an Iron Man suit, but Chase would not let go of this narrative that I was a robot that he had built. It was a great game. It just became repetitive very, very quickly. All of the dungeons were like the same procedurally generated, like the same palette of stuff. For like 30 levels, you would be in buildings, and then for the next 30 levels, you'd be in the same generic cave. But the very first time I logged into City of Heroes, I was greeted by a man that I will never forget.
Oh shit! How have we forgotten this? If it's who I think it is.
Gentleman came up to me and said, "Welcome." He was wearing a white and red costume with a maple leaf on the chest, and his name displayed above his head was Captain Canada. And the moment he walked up to me, he set down a boombox on the ground, hit play, and just started working it, dude. just fucking pumping his arms and legs and dancing to this like techno music that was jamming out of his boombox, and I was like, okay, dude, hey. Moved on through the tutorial, and in the tutorial area, you're zoned in with other tutorial people. But once you get out, you're in the main world with everybody else. First building I walk into is like a library. He is standing on top of a bookshelf, and he's like, "Welcome!" And he just hits that fucking boombox and just started jamming his shit out.
Oh, I'll never forget Captain Canada.
But once we did move on from City of Heroes, we had told ourselves for years we were never playing World of Warcraft, but we popped our fucking subscription cherry with City of Heroes. So I don't remember exactly how it went down, but I feel like it was kind of Chase being like, fuck it, Jesse, you want to go ahead and play World of Warcraft? Kyle plays World of Warcraft.
I remember exactly what it was. I know exactly how it happened.
How did it happen?
You got one of those free trials either in the mail that they just sent out.
I remember this.
Yeah, you got a free trial somewhere, somehow, and you could play WoW for like a week. Maybe it was 2 weeks. I don't know. But I remember you playing it, and I remember watching you play it, and I was just like, let me see if I can get a free trial too. So I got one. We both played together for a while, and we were like, holy shit, this is like crack. Like, we want to play this. And then we actually bought the game, made our real character trial. I know I didn't because it was a night elf.
Right. Nick, since you haven't had a chance to talk about your MMO experiences, I want you to take over for a moment here and tell us about your initial experiences with World of Warcraft.
Okay, so World of Warcraft is where my name comes from. Halquint, comes from World of Warcraft because World of Warcraft was my first MMO. It was also my first online game because where I lived, there was no internet where I lived. There's never going to be internet where I used to live unless someone makes satellite internet that's good. So I was over at my buddy's house and he had satellite internet and he had World of Warcraft and I played it and I had a Blood Elf Paladin. This was in Burning Crusade. And I started playing Friday night after the football game, and I literally didn't stop playing until he made me leave Sunday.
Wow.
I never stopped playing. I played for 30-something hours after playing football.
Jesus.
I literally played for 30 hours straight. So I was like, I got to have this game. So I went and bought a laptop just to play World of Warcraft. And that's when I started driving up to Subway. And when I started playing World of Warcraft, I was like, what do I want to play? And I used to be really big into like summoning and necromancers and stuff in books. And Warlock was like, you can summon demons. I was like, I'm playing that. So I picked Orc. And I rolled a random name, and the name was how it went, and it stuck.
Hell yeah.
So that's how my name came to be, and it was when I started playing World of Warcraft.
It's a good name. I like it. It's, you know, it's rare to find unique name. Whereas like when Chase and I started, I don't remember about our practice characters, our trial characters, but whenever we were making our mains, we started on Alliance. There are going to be people who are going to hear that and are going to cringe, and you can get over it. We like what we like, but we do to this day tilt a little Horde. But we started on Alliance, and I named my character Jericho. I like theming my shit when I can help it, and I named him after a city in the Bible. And I named my pet Damascus. And Chase was trying to think of a name for his dwarf, so we named him Tarsus, which is also a location in the area, essentially. We played that for a while, and, you know, speaking of, like, breaking these early games, I just did not fucking like that goddamn tree. Like, when you're a night elf, you start off in this, like, inside a really, like, claustrophobic giant purple tree, and I just fucking hated it. I did not want to level up in that place. So I looked up how to get out of there, and it's like, all right, here's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to run all the way to the docks. You want to get on a boat. You're going to want to go here. You're going to want to run through here. You're going to want to hop off and swim around the coastline until, like, there's nothing there because the devs didn't really program this area. And then you kill yourself. and you're close enough to a different spawn point that it, like, warps you up the side of the mountain. And so, like, I leveled up my night elf in the dwarf starting area with Chase. So, as far as I'm concerned, he was a night elf that was raised by dwarves. Kind of like...
Wow. I'm not making something difficult.
Yeah, for real. Because I found out later I could have just PM'd somebody in, like, Ironforge and been like, hey, can I get a port, man? But I didn't do that. Just reminds me of that fucking movie, The Jerk. Like, do you mean my skin's always going to stay this color? But I trolled around with Tarsus the Dwarf there for a while, and Chase was definitely enjoying the game way more than I was from the get-go. And those characters only made it to roughly about level 45, but I was enjoying my hunter then, because this is why people still have so much nostalgia for WoW Classic, is because the mechanics were not so homogenized yet, and hunters could have melee weapons and ranged weapons, and then they would auto switch whenever you got into striking range. So I had like a swashbuckling pirate looking night elf hunter that had two like scimitar type thing, and I also had a blunderbuss style gun, and I loved that shit. And, you know, of course, you know, Chase's character was a dwarf, so, you know, he was kind of rocking a similar aesthetic. We were doing really well. And then our friend Kyle was just like, oh, you guys play WoW? I'll play WoW with you. Yeah. What do you guys play? And we're like, we're night elf and a dwarf. And Kyle was like, oh. And that was our introduction to this whole faction allegiance thing. Like, okay, Nick, your first character was an orc, right?
Right.
Did you ever experience that sort of like weird personality difference between Horde players and Alliance players?
Yes. I played on a PvP server, like when that was still a thing. Because I mean, I played on Sargeras, and what was our first server? Was it Illyria?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I started leveling on Sargeras, and Sargeras is 99% Alliance, and I made a Orc Warlock because I didn't know any better. And my entire after I hit level 30, I guarantee you there was 2 days there I couldn't play my character because there was a group of rogues that just killed me immediately every time I res. And I found, and some guys told me, yeah, that's just something the douchebag Alliance do. And I was like, well, I'm gonna go play Alliance so they won't kill me. And he's like, no, we'll come help you. And that was before you could like transfer to different servers. Like it wasn't a feature then, so I was just stuck with whoever was on my server, and it was horrible, and it made me hate Alliance. So I made a new character on Illyria, and that was a little bit more even.
Yeah, we hadn't really experienced that yet because our first server wasn't PvP, and that was a consequence of what our experience had been like in Tibia, because I think Chase and a couple others were like, listen, I'm down to play an MMO, but I am not going to get griefed every 2 seconds while I'm trying to make progress. So we were playing on a regular old server. I think Illyria was non-PvP, and if it wasn't, I'm getting my shit mixed up. But Kyle convinced us to make Horde characters, and I was still on the fence about it. Chase had already made one. You want to tell him a little bit about your boy?
Yes, I'm kind of in a similar boat as Nick when I made that character. I couldn't think of a good name for him. He was an orc shaman, and I couldn't think of a decent name, so I just kept hitting randomize, and I hit it one last time, and it come up with Hog with 2G, and I just looked at that orc and his shit-eating grin, and I was like, he looks like a hog. Yeah, that's his name. And I entered world, and he was Hog from then on. He's my baby. I love that character more than any character I've ever made in my life, and I don't think anyone will ever top him.
And I'll be honest, like the first day I laid eyes on Hog, I was just like, that's right, he looks great. Like, meanwhile, I didn't know what the fuck I was gonna do. To this day, I prefer the Horde storyline and the Horde culture, but I fucking hate their races. Like, compared to Alliance races, like, and a lot of people will like, yeah, that's why the Alliance sucks. They're little kids and they want to play as elves and shit. Yeah, well, fuck off. Like, I do like that.
I want to play as elves and shit.
I do fucking like that. And so, like, I couldn't figure out what I was going to play as. And Ian, this is actually kind of rude of me, but I am going to tell you the story. Ian was like, oh, you're playing WoW. I'm playing WoW now. What server are you on? We're like, well, we're on Illyria. And he's like, oh, damn it. I'm on this server. Why don't you make a character to play with me? And I was like, fuck it, sure. It won't really matter. I'll make one. And I made a troll on that server to play with him named Rasta Fury. And it was just a pun between Rastafarian and Fury, like anger. And I had never played a shaman, and so I was kind of like, dude, shaman's kind of cool, and the troll casting animation looks like he's doing a Kamehameha. And so like I was just like, yeah, I'm kind of really getting a feel for this shit actually. And Ian was like, dope, does that mean you're gonna play with me? And I was like, no, I'm gonna remake this character on Chase's server. And I never came back.
Well, to be fair, if you had stayed with Ian and Zero Zuki or whatever the hell that troll's name was.
It was Zero Zuki.
He quit like 2 weeks later and didn't play again for like several more years. Yep. But, he was a kid back then, basically. Like, we were only like, 16 or 17. So he was like 13 or 14.
Yeah. So I came back, and now we've kind of named off some characters that you guys may have seen in videos. I'll make sure that a link to our World of Warcraft playlist is at the end of this. But, Rasta Fury and Hog have basically always been our mains. Halquint's the name that you're probably used to seeing Nick with. And we slowly but surely started playing WoW with more of our other friends as we went along. Let's see. I
came really late into y'all's WoW life.
You did, and I don't even remember how we started playing games together, to be honest, Nick. I don't know if it was through WoW. I feel like it might have been, or if it had been us hanging out through Matt as a mutual acquaintance. But
we met in Halo.
We met in Halo, that's right. And I think
remember me and Matt stalked everybody.
Mm-hmm. And then you and I started slowly playing more WoW together because I was like, God, I really want this PvP armor, but I suck at PvP. And you were like, I got you. And you you and I did PvP together in Mists of Pandaria until I had the armor that my monk, my Pandaren monk, is still wearing to this day in Transmog, because there's just nothing cooler than that. So we started playing that together. Ian eventually did start playing on our server some more. I don't remember the name of his main on that one because Ian still mostly leans Alliance, and so does Rhett a little bit. But I wish to God Rhett had kept his original name. Chase, do you remember what it is?
I don't.
His undead warlock on Horde.
Oh, never mind.
Was named Edgelord before that was a insult, and later. I was just like, oh man, you got Edgelord. And he was like, why do you keep saying it like that? I was like, did you not know that means like something? And I didn't hit record soon enough, but we were in chat together playing, and he was just reading the Urban Dictionary definition of Edgelord out loud, just with this defeated voice. I'm gonna pull it up right now.
Oh man, it was so fucking funny to hear him read this out loud and just you could just hear the pain.
He had never heard this, and he had just come back to World of Warcraft, just booted up Edgelord. He was like, "Man, I've missed being Edgelord. I love being Edgelord." And then I was like, "Do you know what that means?" And he pulled it up. He was like, "Edgelord, somebody posting on the internet who uses shocking and nihilistic speech and opinions that they themselves may not actually believe to gain attention, has come across as more dangerous and a unique person. Most Edgelords are teenagers trying to seem overly cool and or overly apathetic." And I was just like, "Oh, come on, man." He's like, "I'm changing it." I was just like, "Dude, don't." And he's like, "I'm changing it." So he hasn't been edgelord in a while. His other character is a sire, who is also a night elf hunter, like my character Jericho. And me and Mayo were actually we weren't talking together about it, but I read him reflecting about this recently, about him nakedly going into the fight with Arthas in one of our videos. We used to have a good old time. But before we really started playing with Nick more, we were playing checkers while Halquint was playing 3D chess.
That's true.
I have a story that I want you to tell from the bottom up, if you don't mind.
Is this about the gold making?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
If I start from the bottom up, it's gonna take a while.
Well, that's okay. I might cut this out and make it a separate video.
Okay. So I started playing in BC. That's when I actually got really good at the game. Like, I was really good at PvP. Jesse said I helped him out, but like, I've been Gladiator 13 times on 7 different classes. So I was really good at PvP. I had no idea about raiding, and I was always poor in Burning Crusade. Always poor. Like, you know how the struggle of, I can't even repair my armor.
Mm-hmm.
That was my struggle. And so I talked to one of my buddies in BC, and his name was Mikey P. So he was like a top member of our guild and stuff, and he was really, let's put it this way, he was really rich and WoW, and he would always give me gold making tips and all this stuff, and he finally wrote out a guide for me and gave it to me, and then he gave me some startup gold. And to keep in mind, I think the gold cap on character was 299,063 gold at this time, or something like that. It was something like really odd number.
Yeah, I remember.
So he gave me 50,000 gold and told me about how to make gold. So, and this is when Wrath of the Lich King came out. Like, this was around that time, and so Wrath of the Lich King, I power leveled up my Warlock really fast, got into some good PvP, got into some raiding, and I kind of stopped making as much gold. So then all of a sudden I was like, I really enjoy this whole gold making thing.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, this was on a different server. This was on my Horde server. So I started maining Alliance on Sargeras around this time. So I made a human Warlock, leveled it up really fast, and I started with nothing. Like, had no gold, nothing. And I got picked up by a guild because I was good DPS. And I started on, what was the item I started on? Silk cloth. So I watched the prices of silk cloth every day. I did this on multiple items, and I would write it down in my notepad on what price it was every single day, and every item has a pattern. So I started buying it up on the cheap days and selling it on the expensive days, just like consistently. And then I built up gold, and Mikey P decided he was going to come to Sargeras. And I was like, come on over, we're top 15 raiding guild. And so all of a sudden, me and Mikey P, there was this thing in Wrath called the Frozen Orb. It was like a big crafting thing. You had to have it to make the high-end gear and everything. Well, the frozen orbs were like a huge deal. Like, not a lot of guilds had them. Our guild had them, and some of the top guilds had them. But the difference in our guild and a lot of the other top guilds was they spent all their time in gold and raiding and progressing. And me and Mikey P were in charge of the economy of our guild. And me and Mikey P said, let's start buying the frozen orbs from all these other guilds. And me and him had a lot of gold at the time. Like, I'm going to say between us, we had around 600,000 gold, which sounds like a lot. But wait till I progress in this story. So me and Mikey P started buying all the frozen orbs from all the guilds that wanted to sell them. And just so they could finance their raids, they would sell them. And then me and Mikey P went and bought all the frozen orbs on the auction house. And all of a sudden, these guilds need frozen orbs. These people that want to craft need frozen orbs. So we were buying them for like 5,000 gold on the auction house. And so we started putting up 5 at a time for 10,000 gold. So we were doubling our money. And like we bought them from even less from other guilds. So that's how we really got our starter money. We did that for a long time, like just gouged the price of frozen orbs. And like and I did that off and on a lot, and then skipped to like patch 7.0. I can't remember what expansion that was. Trying to remember.
We can look it up, and I can chop out some. It
was Legion.
Okay.
It was Legion. So Cataclysm. All I did is PvP. I had so much gold from Wrath that I didn't even bother. And all I did is PvP. And I think it was Pandaria. All I did is PvP. And then we got to Legion. And I saw something that just caught my eye. And they said they're raising the gold cap. Because I was gold capped on my guild bank, my regular banks, and all my characters. But all of a sudden, the gold cap goes to 9,000 or 999,000 on characters. And I was like, oh my God.
Just salivating out the mouth.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, like I hadn't really been playing the auction house that much. All of a sudden, at the beginning of Legion, people are seeing that nothing is on the AH of the new material, like nothing. And I see people complaining about it and everything. And what it is, I had my auctioneer set to buy these materials as soon as they went on the AH. Like I had enough capital that I could do that. So every time something would go up for sale of a certain market, it would be bought. Like you could never beat me to it unless you had an add-on doing it for you. And so all of a sudden, all these people need this stuff, and I started selling it. I'd send it to alts and start selling it in stacks, and people thought I was like a bot, and then they figured out I wouldn't, so they started buying from me, and so they just kept buying from me. And keep in mind, the gold cap was raised on the guild banks and the banks as well. And within, I'm going to say 3 months at the beginning of Legion, I was gold capped again, except the gold cap was 999,000. I gold capped everything. And Chase told me about, what was that add-on you told me to get? Because I said I didn't know how much gold I had.
Titan plates? Titan panel. He's
like, download that and tell me how much gold you have. I don't even know if you remember this day.
I do.
And it was like 24 million gold. And then I told them I got in trouble for this. This is the funniest part of the story.
Yeah, this is the part I've been waiting on.
So I had the auctioneer still buying stuff as soon as it went on the AH and stuff. All of a sudden, if you've ever played WoW, you see that blue bubble pop up. I was like, what in the world? What's a DM want? So I opened it up. He said, can you talk for a minute? And I was like, yeah, I'm just sitting here at the auction house. He said, that's what I need to talk to you about. I was like, okay. So
it's like you got pulled into God's office.
Yeah, it's essentially what it was. And so I'm sitting there talking to him, and he tells me, he's like, so what you're doing by constantly buying all these materials and gouging the prices and raising the prices and all this, he said, you're negatively impacting other people's experience. He said, and that's against the terms of agreement. I was like, I disagree. I'm just playing. I said, other people like to raid. I like to play the auction house. And so he gave me like a 24-hour ban that time. And I was ticked. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start selling gold. Give him an actual reason.
I'm going to give you a reason to ban me.
Yep. And so, yeah, now, like, after doing that and messing with the auction house again, the DM told me if I use the auction house for anything but buying minimal materials for, like, gems and enchants, if I do anything else, they'll ban me for good. Jokes on them. I don't have any gold anymore. Sold it all.
but let's include this as long as you're okay with it. This boy sold enough gold. He paid off his student loans in real life with WoW gold. Let's let that just sink in a minute. I'm still in student loan debt.
I'm still in student loan debt.
I still owe like 20 or 30,000, something like that. Nick paid it with WoW gold.
and on my BattleNet, I have like $1,000 on my BattleNet wallet.
The first time I heard that story, I was just like, oh my God, Nick's in the mafia. And I love the shit out of that, man. It's so funny. Oh,
That is by far my favorite WoW story of someone else.
yeah.
Of course, I've got my own that are close to my heart, whatever. But like that's by far my favorite of someone else. Nick, other people raid. Nick raids the auction house.
Yeah. Like
the-
I would literally go in and buy out like certain parts of the auction house and reset the price the way I want it.
The epilogue I want to add to that story is you may already know a little bit about Nick's wealth because as far as I know, there is still a bet that has not been cashed in upon.
And never will be.
Never will be.
Amy was supposed to reach max level in World of Warcraft without dying, and Nick would give her half of his gold. And I believe what happened instead was Amy gave up on playing at about level 8.
Yeah, something like that.
You want to go do Molten Core? No, I'm level 6.
Why not? I'm level 6.
Oh,
man.
shit. But God damn. Go ahead.
Just Chase asking me for gold making tips, and he's just like grinding tooth and nail trying to make money off those old raids, and I'm not moving from my spot.
Yeah, like now I'll tell you the way I used to make gold was my big thing in World of Warcraft was I collected mounts. I have like over 200 mounts in that game or something ridiculous. I don't know exact number, but I've got a fuck ton of mounts, and that's what I.
He has way more than me.
Yeah, I like to collect mounts, so I did. And
if I could buy them, he would.
Yeah, that's true. But so I bought all the ones that were buyable, unless they were like locked behind a reputation, and then I would run these old ass raids because the game didn't scale at the time, and it still doesn't unless you do it a very specific way. So like, I could walk into like Molten Core or even like Ice Crown Citadel, basically anything that wasn't the very last expansion, and just melt the place. So like I would walk in there, do that, and get the drops, and I would sell all that for my extra gold, and I would make okay gold doing that because you could only do a raid once a week and would hit the lock day and it would unlock it back. But I would do those all the time. I would get, I don't know, I think I made a big guide on it one time, and I think it was like if you did all the raids possible, it was something like 11,000 gold or 12,000 gold a week, which is pretty decent for the average player. But I never had the kind of gold Dick had until Battle for Azeroth came out, which is the most recent expansion, and it was me, Nick, and William. And we had this plan to make what were we selling, Nick? It was that flower, and I don't remember the name.
I can't remember.
It was some flower that they needed for potion in the newest. This was before the raid come out, so like we were trying to get ahead of the game. We wanted to be on the market with the best price and the most.
Oh, I remember. I was telling you both this.
Yeah. It was Star something. I just don't remember the name. But and on top
Golden
of that,
Lotus, wasn't it?
no, I wouldn't.
I'll look it up.
Okay. But and I had a little side business going. We all kind of did too. Before that raid came out, people would also make. They would use their cooking skill and make feast, and it would give you a big ass buff for the whole raid. And you needed midnight salmon to do that, and you had to have max fishing skill to catch them reliably. And I would log in and I would just catch fish. I would just sit there and fish for like an hour until I had a whole stack of midnight salmon. And then I would sell those bastards for like 20K per 5 stack. Like it was ridiculous. I was making more gold than I had ever seen. I mean, it wasn't anything compared to what Nick had made in the past, but like that was like my heyday of gold making.
Well, you just got to pick your market. I told you need to be focusing on like what raiders need.
Yeah.
And it was anchorweed.
Right. Anchorweed, that's what it was.
Before we forget, there's at least one more unique WoW story that we've got to tell that's not been in any video that I feel like is strange enough that I think we may be the only ones that tell this story, and that's of a certain individual on Timeless Isles.
Yeah. We really need Rit or Ian for this story, but that's just we're gonna have to do, because I don't think Nick ever met this guy, because I would have fucking loved to see Nick fight this guy to know which king of God PvP would come out on top. But during Mists of Pandaria, there was a place called Timeless Isle, and while you were there, you were technically back in time, so you couldn't fly there. you couldn't do a lot of different things there that you could do outside of that area. It was an island that was locked in time. So you would go there and you would grind rare mobs, and there were plenty of mounts that dropped there. It was like the end game thing to do other than raid. And we would go there all the time. Me and Rhett, Jesse, and Ian, everybody, we'd go to Timeless Isle. And we'd just, go around grinding the mobs, trying to get what everybody else is getting. And we met a Worgen warrior there named the Wargster. This man was unkillable. The other guys are convinced straight up that he was a GM, and I don't think he was, because I personally don't think Blizzard would let one of their GMs fuck with their players like this, especially if they were going to get nicked for just playing the auction house too much. Like, I don't think they would let the GM just up and kill people like the way this guy did. But on Timeless Isle, you could flag yourself in such a way that your own faction could kill you. Normally when you're flagged, if you're Alliance, only Horde. So this guy would flag himself. It would get you blood coins or something. I can't remember the currency. But he would flag himself to where literally anyone in the game could step up to him if they so chose. And I never seen him get killed by anyone. Like, it wasn't even a contest. He would just stomp the hell out of anyone who fought him. I watched him take on like full like five-man groups of people, and he'd come out on top. Every time. Like, he was unkillable.
And I'm sure that we've had this explained by now, but back then we didn't know. Didn't you say somebody had seen him flying?
Rhett, it's either Rhett or Ian, or maybe both of them. One of them swears up and down they seen him flying on Timeless Isle, and that's why they think he's a GM. And I don't think Blizzard would allow that to fly, just letting a GM do shit like that out in broad daylight to let people see. But I think he was using, you could get these things that was basically like a glider, kind of like the goblin gliders that are in the game today, but it was one of those Pandaren kite, and you could jump off something and activate it, and you could glide down. Like, you couldn't go up, you could only go down. And I'm pretty sure that's what Rhett saw, because that's the only thing that would explain it, in my opinion.
I would have liked to have fought him.
I would love for you to have fought him.
Because I don't think there's a warrior alive that could have beat my feral druid.
Yeah. Well, see, the interesting thing about him is I never seen him attack someone else. Like, he would always run around and help people in his flagged state until someone hit him first. And that was the last thing they did.
Yeah, the feral druid is what I used to help Jesse in PvP. Remember the battle plan and that, Jesse?
Hold
on.
I
do.
I might remember this.
Like, whenever I played with your monk in PvP with my feral druid.
I was on my monk. Okay, so it had something to do with Touch of Karma, I think, but I could be wrong. Okay. Yeah.
You had low health because you didn't have a lot of PvP gear, and it was like, go in, touch a karma someone, and I'll full bleed that person. And then it became a 1-on-1 or like a 1v2.
Yeah.
And feral druids were really broken then in 1v1. I mean, did you ever see me lose a 1v1?
And that was, fighting alongside you was one of the only things that gave me any actual confidence in that game. Because what can really ruin my experience in an MMO is trying my hardest and still knowing that I'm just doing something wrong and I can't put my finger on it. That's what really prevented me from enjoying Chase, the Norse themed MMO.
Ragnarok.
Part of what prevented me from enjoying Ragnarok was, like, I was trying my best, I was looking up guides, and I was still blowing it. And I've always been that guy in video games. Like, I'm able to laugh about it now, about how bad I can be at them sometimes. But to be honest, that's what always takes the wind out of my sails. The first time I unsubbed for a long time, it was because I had busted my ass, and I was finally max level in an expansion for the first time. And I was like, all right, I'm ready to see what this endgame content is like, because I didn't enjoy leveling, and everybody was like, well, the game gets so much more fun at endgame. I was like, let's do this endgame content, and it was like, well, you can't because you don't have endgame armor. So it was a whole brand new grind to get endgame armor, and I got it, and then my guild was just like, well, you're not rating in that armor, are you? Like, that's the shit that you use to get to the real good endgame armor. And I was like, I quit. Fuck you. I quit. I hate you. I hate WoW. And it was Wrath, so I was like, and I fucking hate snow.
I remember the one thing that really discouraged me. It didn't discourage me enough to quit playing, but I was just like that. But it's in a similar vein to what Jesse just described. We got to the end game of Wrath of the Lich King, and back then there was no dungeon finder, there was no raid finder. You had to find pickup pug, and you had to post in chat and just be like, level whatever shaman, looking for raid or looking for whatever. And people would always message me and be like, are you elemental or enhancement? Be like, I'm enhancement. And they're like, oh, never. Because in Wrath, enhancement shamans were trash, like absolute garbage. And
Except for PvP.
Except for PvP, yes, because I could actually deal some damage in there. But they would not take you. Like they wouldn't take you. Period. Like that's it. Bottom of the line, you're not elemental or restoration, you not going. And I had to swap specs, and I did not like elementalist at the time. So, and Jesse was always elementalist. That was his class, and I was enhanced. And like every other expansion, it would flip flop. One of us would be like leaps and bounds stronger than the other one, just because of the way their dumbasses balance classes.
Yeah, basically, and this is gonna sound like a really fucking ignorant statement, but the moment any game establishes a meta that you can't have any uniqueness or variety or creativity in your build, you've gotta have the build. The moment it reaches that point, I want fucking nothing to do with it. And that's essentially what had happened, but what I didn't realize was that future expansions of WoW would make things much worse, because even though we had that problem, to this day, we still consider Wrath to be the best shaman has ever been. Because after that, like, they just, it was our favorite class. It was our favorite class. You drop these little totems, and they do like group buffs, and that was like the point of it, is that you did AoE like group buffs by having these totem, like a totem pole, totems. That was what shamans were themed around entirely. They still have a totem next to them in the character creator. You don't have totems anymore. They got rid of totems.
like the only totems you have in game anymore are the kinds that you throw down that like a tremor totem. It'll like break fear or something like that, and that's about it.
It's like if they got rid of warlocks, demons,
Counter Strike, and a couple more.
Yeah,
I played shaman like really competitively in Legion, and I was enhancement. Like at one time I was in the top 4 DPS shaman on the planet. And that just show you that I played enhancement, and you know what, the next tier down, I had the absolute best gear for elemental as well. I could pull this amount, like say I'm pulling a skyscraper with enhancement, and I'm pulling a double-decker bus with elemental. Like you're talking about, they make the specs so far apart.
Yeah,
they really do.
The same way. It was the same way in Legion.
Yeah, it's like night and day between the different specs, and it's not just shaman, but I think shaman typically gets the worst of it. But
I think mages get the best of it.
No, I think druids get the best of it. Like,
okay, yeah, I agree with that.
yeah, okay. Well, at least you can see it. Like, I don't mean to try and talk shit on druids every chance I get, because I know it's William's favorite class and it's hard to mention this around him, but druids are straight up baby's first class. They can do literally everything, and they can do that role better than classes that only have that, and it's bullshit.
Yeah, druid's definitely Superman.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely the most overtuned, because Feral wasn't in a great place in Legion, but Boomkin was top 3 range DPS. Resto Druid was the number 1 raid healer, and Guardian Druid was the best Mythic Plus tank.
They seem to always be on top, and I hate it. Absolutely.
More in chat is relating this whole problem with metagaming back to Team Fortress 2. On Team Fortress 2 MVM, I did finally get an Australian weapon, but not before being berated by people in the beginning for not knowing a lot, because it was the meta. And that's really what I hated about it, is that, like, don't get me wrong, in a weird, fucked up way, I kind of miss the toxicity of voice chat in, like, 2000s online gaming. But not whenever it's people who have no patience for you being a newbie for a fraction of a second. Like, I'm allowed to be new until I learn, and there's just no fucking patience for that kind of shit in games like that.
Yeah, people like to forget.
Yeah. And it's like going back to Guild Wars 1. If you didn't skip the cutscenes, people got fucking angry. They wanted to know who didn't skip. They demanded to know who didn't skip the cutscene. I will not move until I find out. Well, motherfucker, you think we've all seen it? Like, I'm sorry.
Really bad about that too. Well, I won't say really bad. Like Final Fantasy 14 legit has probably the nicest community I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
But that does not mean they are exempt from asshole, because there are still people in that game that suck, and the cutscenes were a part of that too. Because, like, I didn't play 14 until Heaven's Ward had already been out first expansion, so I was going through a Realm Reborn really, really late, and I wanted to watch the cutscene. Like in that game, they didn't have to wait for you. Like, there would be a little ring around the characters for like 30 seconds, and anyone still watching the cutscene would just be standing. Like, you would log in, or you would finally get out of your cutscene. They might be halfway through the dungeon because they didn't.
Yeah.
Which at the end of the day, it's kind of like, oh sweet, free loot or free dungeon, but like I still wanted to play it.
Yeah, it feels like you've been disrespected. Let's go from there, since we finally caught up to World of Warcraft, to other more contemporary MMOs that we have enjoyed.
Okay, like what?
Well, Nick, is there any other MMOs that you've enjoyed outside of World of Warcraft?
Trying to think. Any like recent ones. MMO.
It honest to God feels like right now, actually for a long time now, there's really only been 2 on the market at all. Everything else either sucks or is free to play, which means more grindy than anything you can imagine.
Yeah, like I played a little bit of Final Fantasy, but it's just something about Final Fantasy. I just can't get into the visuals.
And that's the same with me. I do like the realism of it, because like WoW's graphics are stylized, and even with the graphical update, it still kind of feels like a big old lumpy cartoon, and I'm okay with that because that's the expectation. But Final Fantasy's approach is a more like photorealism in terms of characters and things like that. The problem is I don't like the color palette. Like in reality, it can be colorful all day, but it still kind of feels like you're looking at the whole thing through like a gray lens. And I think that's part of what I dislike about it. And I also don't like hyper high fantasy settings. And that's really all Final Fantasy is like ultra high fantasy. I tried really. Go ahead.
Real quick about it's funny you mentioned the color thing, because I've been watching Ross, Rubber Ross from Game Grumps, or formerly of Game Grump. I've been watching him stream a lot lately, and he's usually making Mario Maker, but he also plays 14 a lot. And one day I was watching him, and he has an add-on, like something that runs in the background, just like WoW, that specifically changes the whole color palette of the game. And people in his chat were like, "What the hell's wrong with your game?" And he'd be like, "Oh yeah, let me show you." And he would turn it off, and everything just immediately went to like crappy, washed out. And I was just like, "Holy shit!" Like when he turned it on, it looked amazing.
God, I've not even known about that. That's badass. Yeah, there for a hot minute, I was thinking about going back to 14, and then I bought Final Fantasy 12 on my Switch, and it feels exactly the same, only it's a single-player RPG, and I'm just like, yeah, this'll do. This'll do it for me. I'm all right. I'm not going to pay a subscription. Thanks, guys.
Did you beat 12?
No, I'm kind of stuck, and right now when I'm booting up my Switch, I'm mostly playing Mario Maker levels of the week, but I am thankful to have it. And stupidly, I've told people this before, a lot of my decisions on which Switch games I get is based on what can I play while in a sitting elliptical at the gym. Because I will play video games while exercising at the gym. I don't give a shit if you're gonna look at me. I don't give a fuck. I have a short attention span and a lot of fat, so I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. And I used to play Wargroove on the treadmill and on the sitting elliptical, and that was dope because it's a turn-based game. So whenever it's not my turn, I would take my hands off of the controls and do the hand workout instead of the leg workout, and I would alternate that. Whereas Final Fantasy 12 is a game that the whole point of it is to get to where it plays it for you. So like I was gonna try to play that, and I just haven't played it in a minute. There are MMOs that I wanted to be good. There have been a lot of times over the years that people have been like, well, will this be the WoW killer? Will this be the WoW killer? And it's just like, I hope it will, because I love playing WoW for a good 5 minutes. Like, it really feels like every time I come back to WoW, I love it a lot for a second. And then we're all talking about everything they dropped the ball on. I wanted Guild Wars 2 to be great. Guild Wars 2 fucked Chase over hard.
Yeah, my account got hacked too. They sold all my gear and everything I had. And when I contacted ArenaNet about it, it's like, sucks to suck. And they wouldn't help me or give me any of my shit back. Whereas in World of Warcraft, I had been hacked, and they sold all my shit. And I contacted Blizzard, and they just restored my character to the way where I got hacked. Like, yeah, we can talk shit on Blizzard all day about how their games suck now, but
their support's good,
fantastic.
Yeah.
And ArenaNet just told me to piss off, and I was just like, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm never going to play your game again, and I quit.
Exactly. And that's why I'll never play it again, because I know how they fucked Chase over. So even if I felt like forgiving them for that, I know Chase isn't going to play with me. So that's an example of how that shit can go so hardcore against you. I wanted DC Universe Online to be good because, I'm still itching to scratch that like City of Heroes like need. But what little I played of DC Universe Online, I didn't really enjoy. I know a lot of people do enjoy it, you know, like I know Ian played it there for a while, but it wasn't quite it for me.
Yeah, I don't think I could get into that. I definitely don't think I could get into the Star Wars MMO right now. It's basically free to play because it had, and I don't think I just wouldn't play it. There's nothing I want to play other than WoW.
I'll never go back to WoW.
Yeah.
I think I'm
never-
just kind of done with MMOs.
Yeah, I'll never go back at the launch of an expansion ever again because I was there for the launch of Legion, which was fantastic. Legion was great. I don't see how you go from Legion to the shit show that BFA is, but I was there for the launch of BFA, and that game or that expansion sucked. Never again.
I've had a really back and forth experience because I know after Wrath, people really wanted me to come back to World of Warcraft, and I was like, man, I don't know. Every time people tell me it's good now, it's not, and I really don't enjoy it. And then it flip-flopped because Warlords of Draenor came out, and overwhelmingly people did not like that one, and I was like, this is the best expansion I've played yet, and I was really into that one, overwhelmingly so, even though I didn't like the story. And then Legion came out, and I just lost interest, you know. I felt bad about it because I had said I was going to play and I didn't. But then when Battle for Azeroth came out, we were all on the same page. We were just like, this is fucking garbage. Like, all of the zones have the kind of the same feel. Like, all of the classes have just gotten homogenized and neutered. Like,
I do like the zones of BFA. I will give it that. I think they're more unique than the rest of the game, but they absolutely every class, everything's like $3.
Yeah, and like we have this conversation all the time because we used to argue all the time about whether or not a game should avoid being casual. And now that we've defined the terms, I don't have a problem with increasing the accessibility of a game. I have a problem with decreasing the overall learning curve of what you can do with it. Because, like, having a viable build that's only 3 buttons, sure, for PvE, you know, but having a viable build where you can only hit 3 buttons for raiding, you see, now you've just babied me. You know, like that's something else entirely. I don't like some games. I don't want to stress every fucking moment of it. You know, like it was hard for me to get into Dark Souls. When my friends talk about Dark Souls 3, they don't say how good it is typically. They say it's the easiest Dark Souls game. But for me, the reason it was so wonderful for me is that it is the most accessible Dark Souls game. It is still very hard, but it wasn't as dauntingly hard. And I wish more MMOs could be like that. I hate grinding. I hate being gated by both the difficulty and the game and how far people have their heads up their fucking asses about it. It's very difficult to penetrate an MMO without running into any number of these factors. And I have never met fans that hate their own fandom more than MMO players, and it's with very valid reason.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say one fan base that may hate themselves more. League of Legends.
I agree. I agree. What very little I have played of League compared to Nick or Matt, I can say without a doubt he's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just don't see myself ever going back to MMO because it's so much of a time investment. If there's an MMO that's not just a massive time investment,
Then it's
maybe.
not MMO.
But that's my
Exactly.
thing too, is that, like, you know, okay, Chase and I used to have semi-arguments about this because, you know, he wanted to play with me, but he couldn't play with me because I hadn't invested the same amount of time in the game. And, you know, like, that should be optional. You know, there for a hot minute, every form of microtransaction was the devil. Nobody wanted it at all. But if I can give you money instead of time so that I can have the same kind of fun that my friends have, I will do it. Like, I've paid to skip whole chunks of the story in Final Fantasy. I've paid for level boosts in World of Warcraft. And it's because when I get behind, having not invested that time prevents me from being able to have fun with my friends when I am free. And
Yeah.
I don't have the magic bullet to fix that problem because the reward of progress in an MMO is having sunk that time. But ultimately, I don't always have it. And so, like, I'm telling you, man, like, growing up as a guy who plays video games with friends has really, like, I've gone through several periods of my life when I've been like, am I being a fucking, like, just hardcore weeb right now for being so upset about this? Because there have been moments in my life that have stirred up sincere drama, all because of the limitations of video games. Like, you know, that whole time versus progress thing. Like, I have real friend drama because I don't get to hang out with them as much, and then like whether or not you can play with certain friends. Incredible example of that's relevant to this podcast is World of Warcraft factions. If I like elf titties better than I like orc titties, I can't play with my friends anymore. I'm just sitting here playing with my elf titties. But like legitimately, I've been that guy that's been like, I want them to get rid of the faction limitations in WoW, and everybody else is like, wow, why would you do that? Well, I'll tell you why you would do that. Because it places an unnecessary gate on the way that I play with my friends, and I understand that it destroys the lore. That's why you can't do that. But
yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, I get where Jesse's coming from, but if they did away with the faction, I would never touch again.
But I'm gonna tell you though, it reminds me of the way that they've handled PvP into where you can queue up into somebody else's I kind of wish you could just wear that dinky ass mask in questing. Like, I wish you could just be like,
I'd be okay with.
And to be real, like, even if you role play, that's still fucking funny. Like, that's still,
I agree. That'd be perfect.
Yeah, like you just switch to alliance mode. It swaps everything over. It gives you a warning. Hey, you don't need to be somewhere where you're gonna get killed. Like, you need to do this, and it just puts a fucking mask on you. And it's not like people don't know. People know, like, or maybe you appear in costume to people who aren't in your party. But if you're in a party, it's just like, yeah, I'm gonna work, guys. I got orc titties, but orc titties are spiky.
Always.
You don't know?
Orc titties have mohawks.
Yes.
Wow.
I guess to close things out, I think we've all kind of settled into the same mentality on MMOs in that online multiplayer games are fun as fuck, and like none of us are opposed to socializing with strangers on the internet, but they come with their own set of fucking baggage that ultimately always gets in the way. It's kind of like red flags on a new girl you're trying to date. Like, she's hot, but she's a little fucked up too.
All right.
Well, of course you'd say that. You made a lot of money off of her.
Never stick your dick in crazy.
Never stick your fucking credit card chip in it either. All right.
Might get in trouble for that.
So
or you might get what you wanted.
Yeah. So that's been clubfradio.wave. Right now we're kind of going through old stories while we get a chance to introduce some people that you might not have heard from that much yet, especially people who have been featured more prominently on the show as of late. Thanks again to Halquint, Nick, aka Halquint, for joining us. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, it's always fun.
You got anything important you want to tell the people?
I can't wait for the Rust server. I'm coming after all of you.
I'll do that right now. Let me go find a host.
We're staying in the Stone Age because I'm going to kill you all so many times you don't get to get guns. Pretty good with a crossbow.
Okay. Thanks so much, you guys, for coming out. Thanks so much to Mort and Mr. Mayo in the Discord chat. Remember, if you're paying at the Undead Host tier or higher, you can listen to these live as they're being recorded. And if you're listening to this after the fact, you can find it on YouTube or Spotify. And
what? I think he got DC'd.
That was perfect. That's perfect.
Unless he did that on purpose, I think his internet went out again.
Good night, everybody.
You got everybody.
Oh, God, I thought of a story. No, sorry. You thought we were done, but we've got one more. There is a reason that people always assume if I've been quiet for too long that something's wrong with my internet, and it's because my entire life I have never been able to escape connection problems. And if there's ever been an appropriate time to tell this story, it's now. Nick, you talked about satellite internet earlier, and I want to talk a little bit about how satellite internet works for people who live in rural Alabama with no fucking hardline connection. Your internet signal is coming from space, which sounds real sci-fi until you realize that light can only go so fast. So if it's got to go into space and come back, that means you are absolutely going to have an input delay. There's nothing that can be done about it, right? World of Warcraft is not a turn-based game. It is an action-oriented game. And because of where I lived, I had to level from 1 to 80 on my shaman on satellite internet, which meant anytime I clicked a button or hit a skill, it didn't happen until like 3 seconds later. And I leveled from 1 to 80 on a shaman like that, and I was only able to because shamans are ranged. So I could queue up spells and he would just be rotating through them, and that was okay. Things weren't getting close to me. But there would be a lot of times in really important battles when I would just stop talking and start running in place, and our friend Kristen would be like, goddamn Rastanet again, because my character's name was Rasta and I was on HughesNet. And so I wrote in big marker on my HughesNet router, Rastanet. And like that has been a long-standing thing to go back to whenever I'm having connection issues, is my fucking Rastanet. And it's so funny because if you've been keeping up with my life, you know that I had an unexpected job dismissal and an unexpected move into my fiance's parents' house, and they don't let me run quote-unquote Ethernet cords across the quote-unquote hallway. So I've been on Wi-Fi for a while, and now I'm running a power line Ethernet adapter. So my internet is coming not through Ethernet, but through power wiring, and occasionally it just goes out. It really does just fucking go out. Like, my internet can be shut off because there are too many things plugged up. So like so yeah, that's the podcast. Thanks again for coming out. I really appreciate you guys. And if you pay at the Perler tier, those are coming. I finished all 5 of them. They're sitting right in front of me. I just have to iron them. So those are going to get mailed on Friday. They're going out to everybody who paid for them this last month. Again, Candy got sick and wasn't able to make them, so almost send them. You'll still get one at the end of this month if you continue to pledge. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm not going to do another joke about getting disconnected.
GG!
See y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.